Welcome to the Community Engagement and Outreach Committee's July 15th, 2021 meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with CEOC members, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. I would like to introduce staff and CEOC members present. I'm going to go ahead and just do the roll call this time just because I'm not really sure who all is here. So I'm just gonna go with the list that I have here, starting with Mihal Bortnick.
Here.
Rich Klein. Tiffany Dow.
Here.
Yadira DeSiena.
Present.
Leslie Feldman.
Here.
Richard Lee. Dan McMahon.
Here.
Nahizia Larvia.
Here.
Victoria Robledo. Vicky. I see you.
Yes, I'm here.
Aaron Spalding.
Here.
And Sudie Johnson.
Present.
Staff and consultants present include Deanna Chow, Cal Chan, Jeff Bradley from N Group, and Sun Quan from N Group. I hope I said that correctly.
Sun Quan.
Sun Quan. Senior planner Cal Chan, would you please provide instructions to the CEOC and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Chair Fennell and members of the CEOC. Welcome everyone to the July 15, 2021 meeting of the CEOC, and thanks everyone for attending. At this time, we ask that members of the CEOC please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones, and please keep mics on mute when not speaking to avoid any cross sound. Staff will engage the webcams and microphones in order to make presentations and to respond to members of the CEOC. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you that are joining us from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. We'll have the ability to open your microphone and then you can provide your comment to the CEOC. That concludes our instructions and I return the meeting back to you, Chair Fennell.
Under public comment, the public may address the CEOC on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the CEOC once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The CEOC cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the CEOC cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than provided general information. Caljan, do we have any public comment?
At this time, if any member of the public has any public comment, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining by phone or landline, please press *9. Give a moment for any call-in or public members in attendance. I don't see any comments from members of the public. I do see that COC member Spalding does have his hand raised.
Member Spalding.
Yes, so if this is appropriate for me to address the committee for briefly. I'd like to make sure that the committee is aware of this. So I'm on this committee as a resident of District 3 and as someone who rents here at Menlo Park. But I think it's important to point out that I'm also an employee of SRI International. And as you may have heard, as it's not public, SRI is working with a developer to prepare a plan to do some, to redevelop its campus, and as part of that, to build housing on that campus. And I really can't speak for SRI on that, but I want to make sure that the committee knows that I am an employee there, so that and if it's of interest to the committee, I can reach out to folks at SRI and at the developer that can speak more about that project.
Thank you, Member Spalding. Is there any other public comment?
There's no other public comment at this time. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to go ahead with our agenda, starting with D1, Sung Kwan, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. So M Group and staff has provided summary minutes for the past three meetings for the May 27th, June 3rd, and June 10th. These are intended to be summary minutes, and they're at a very high level. There's also links to the recordings of the CEOC meetings at the minutes. And if you have any questions or have any comments, please let us know.
Thank you. Calchin, do we have any public comment on the item?
If any member of the public would like to provide public comment on item D1, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen or press *9 if joining by phone. There are no public comments at this time.
Thank you. We are going to move on to D2, review and provide feedback on draft community survey. Jeff Bradley to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair Fennell, members of the committee. I will like to share my screen for this item. I'll bring that up. This is review and provide feedback on the draft community survey that we've been working with staff and the survey subcommittee that consists of members Feldman, McMahon, Oliveria, and Robledo. Apologize if I mangled your name. I'll get better at that. So we met with the two members of the subcommittee. Were able to meet with us on July 6th. Two were unable to make it, unfortunately, but then we did open up a shared Google Doc where member Robledo was able to make comments as well. And so what you're seeing now on your screen, hopefully, everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Never really trust this technology to get some feedback. So this is consolidating all the comments we received and taking to heart the input we got about making it user-friendly, shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, just easy to digest, a pretty quick read. We estimate the reading time for this is about 3 to 5 minutes. Obviously, people will take a little longer to think about some of their answers. So we're hoping people can complete it in 10 to 15 minutes. There are a number of questions. We narrowed it down to, at one point we had over 40 questions, and now we have it down to 26 questions total. So we do think it's manageable. The most questions are in this first category, demographic questions, to better understand the folks that are answering the survey and see if we can detect any patterns based on the demographic information and the type of responses that the remainder of the questions garner. We would like to point out, we took the committee's idea about offering an incentive to people who fill out the survey. So we developed a program where we would have 12 $25 gift cards, and then everyone who answers the survey and agrees to provide their name and email for the purposes of this raffle, we would draw them out randomly and send those out to those folks. So we hope that's a tangible thing to give people a little reason to take the time to fill it out. We also had a recommendation to add a map so people could visually see the different council districts, so they could more easily identify which district they're living in. The districts obviously are fairly recent development in Menlo Park, so not everyone may know right off the bat what district they're in. And then even with the maps, some people may not be, the maps may not be at the level of detail where they could figure out exactly what district they're in, especially if they're near the edge of the boundary between two districts. So we also link to the existing district lookup tool on the city's website. That's the underlying text there you see in blue. So people can quickly go there, enter their address, and determine which district they are in, and then come back to the district, or excuse me, come back to the survey and enter that information. Then we have some questions about where people live, whether they're single, married, have children living with or without them, a race and ethnicity question, gender and age. A lot of this stuff feels really nosy, and why are they asking me this kind of questions? But a lot of it really does tie in directly to some of the information we need for the housing element to document what the actual profile of the community is, and this can help make our document stronger to have that more detailed information in the beginning, rather than having a decline to state on every, or prefer not to answer on every question. Up front, we say if you're uncomfortable answering any of these questions, just skip it. And then we get into the housing questions, where there is, I believe, 7 of those. We get into the meat of it. So yeah, down at the bottom here, we transition into the housing questions, which we also added a little, right below where it says housing questions, you see a short little paragraph that gives a context for these questions. That was some specific guidance we received from the subcommittee, so we added that to each of the sections.
I'm just want to ask when we can ask questions directly about some of the questions.
Okay, let me get through this and then
Okay.
we go to that.
All right, sorry.
No problem. Then we get into questions about helping us identify how to serve special needs populations and where new housing should go in the community, type of housing people support. We tried to keep these really simple and avoid any planning, building jargon. We looked at providing graphics in this section, but then the graphics become the focus, and really hard to capture the full range of styles and designs that are possible. We talk about what people would support in traditionally single family areas. We're seeing more and more of this in different cities, such as Portland and Austin. They're starting to allow small multifamily living structure buildings, dwellings in single family areas. We had a question around displacement. Vicky had a lot of comments around issues in Belhaven and displacement pressures. So we wanted to capture that in a way that was open to anyone in the community who may be experiencing that. And then we transitioned to environmental justice. And then we go into the safety element with just a couple of questions. We did receive a recommendation to remove the word element in here, which we meant to do that, but it slipped through. So I do, that would be consistent with how we frame the housing questions. It just says housing questions. And the element in this context, I agree, doesn't add anything. And then we get into how people heard about this project, so we can tailor our outreach efforts accordingly. And then this last part is totally optional. But if people want to enter into the drawing, we ask them just to give us their name and email. I can stop sharing now unless the committee would prefer that I keep this up.
Is that go for questions now or input?
Yes.
Can you please keep it up? Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Vicky, I can call on you if you put your hand up.
Okay, my hand isn't here as always. That's why I don't have a hand.
Yeah, give me a second.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a friendly reminder to CEOC members, if you're available to do so, please keep your cameras on so that we can ensure quorum, and for also making sure that members of the public can see who is in attendance, because with your cameras off, the names will be obscured. Thank you.
I can't get my camera back on. That's what I've been trying to do.
Vicky, we'll go with you. It's kind of hard for me to see whose hand is raised. but
Okay.
Vicky, we'll start with you and I'll just
Okay.
look
Thank
to
you.
see
And-
whose hand's raised.
I don't know how to get my face back on here, so I apologize for that. Yeah, first and foremost, thank you guys for the work in putting this together. My concern is the length, because when I think of surveys in Bellhaven, in my community specifically, I plan on actually getting the surveys done, going to places to get these. Am I supposed to hit the start my video to get my face back?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, there. So I would like to physically go to places and get the surveys done. And I think 26 questions, for me, when I've done surveys, asking the questions can speed it along. Also the issue of language, and for some, like question like number 9, how many people live in your household? I don't know how relevant that is to those who might have the issue of undocumentation and are fearful. Number 10, the question of how many rooms in your house. I don't know that that's relevant either. And then, I mean, 16, 17, I thought those were good questions. 20, to rephrase it. I think when I'm thinking of a survey, I want it short and sweet. If I'm stopping somebody, I'm asking them questions, short and sweet. Give me 10 questions, 15 questions, and I'll ask them and I'll just mark them down and they can sign it. So it says that they answered them, but maybe I just read them the questions. So I think like number 20, that's such a lengthy question to just put, do you see pollution and an increase in sound because of all the cars cutting through your community? It's like, I want to get to the root of the problem and the questions with the community, because when they're lengthy, I think this sort of turns people off. I think there's some really good questions there, but I think if we could condense it to maybe the maximum of 15 that are really, really the issues that the community has, because I don't care how many people live in your house. I don't care how many rooms you have in your house. I care what is impacting you the most as a resident in this community. And so some of them, like I said, just, some of our families here, are they concerned about biking? Yeah, they're probably more concerned about traffic and their kids getting hit. But I mean, that could be tweaked. I just wish we could try to condense it and really come up with questions that are more applicable to those that live in specific communities. And that's what I think sometimes is the issue. Some of these questions aren't relevant to some people because they're just struggling to live. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Robledo. I'm just going to go with what's on my screen. So Member Feldman.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I think your point about limiting the number of questions is a really good point. I think I was the one originally, M Group had a question about how many people in the household, and I recommended following that with a number of bedrooms. But really the point of that, I think, was just to get at, is there overcrowding, or are you experiencing sort of, not sufficient housing for your family or household?
But that's how we should phrase it, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we just
Yeah.
ask directly. Yeah.
Yeah, just real directly, because again, like I said, in Bellhaven, we probably have a larger group here of a Latino community here. And I think it's that comfort level to ask questions that don't feel like it's threatening to them, but just real sincere. And I'm not sure exactly, maybe I missed it, how we plan on doing this survey, because I was wanting to physically go to my local stores, walk door to door. That's the type of that's how I'm going to get my surveys done, because it's a trust development in getting them to. And then I would like to hand them a $25, not have them submit a raffle, because some people may not know what a raffle is. And then is it intrusive to their privacy again? It's like the survey should be sort of anonymous, just saying where they live maybe, and maybe their name if they want to sign, say who they are and then sign it. And that's why I reiterate that there's real differences in the communities. and how we approach them and the trust level of those and why they want these surveys.
Member Spalding.
So I also shared a concern about how this may be distributed. Just looking at this, it's a PDF of, I guess, a Word doc, and it has links. Obviously, if you're going to be distributing hard copy, those links aren't too useful. And then things like the pictures of the districts is problematic. And I think that Vicky's idea of being able to, hand deliver the surveys to people, I think is very important to getting community engagement here. And especially, if you can say, hey, I can give you the gift certificate or the gift card right now. You don't have to sign your name. You don't actually have to have an email address in order to be able to register for to get the gift card. I think those are very good ideas. And then I also echo some of the other members' points that this does seem kind of long. And I understand, it feels like there's multiple needs here that this survey is trying to address. And I don't have a real good idea of sort of which ones are more important. I mean, there's a lot of demographic information here. And then there's a lot of stuff about the specific concerns, environmental justice, safety, some of the overcrowding issues, perhaps. But then there's very little places where people who fill out this survey can sort of in free form voice their concerns. If their concern doesn't fit nicely into a checkbox here, I feel like it's going to be invisible with the survey. So I guess the couple of questions are, how could the survey be made more concise and still capture the data that we need? And how can we allow people to express their particular concerns that may not be addressed by the specific questions that are here?
Thank you, Member Spalding. Member Mihal.
Thank you, but members DeSiena and Tronson were before me. I don't like cutting a line. If
I'm not really sure.
Mind.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
fine. I'm not really sure. So I will go with Member DeSiena.
Thank you so much. So kind of you. So I've done surveying in this community for many years, and I feel like the survey is tailored to a certain educational set of people, especially high education levels, and this is not tailored for the community that I live in. If I were to talk to someone in that language that the survey is tailored to, I feel like it would be a little disrespectful for me to open up Pandora's box, because many communities here have been underserved, and some of the questions there might trigger something, which will then lead me to potentially having to then provide resources at that moment, you just help someone. So I'm thinking, I have reached out to some community members here regarding how I can do some outreach. And I've actually gotten a couple of teachers in the community who are willing to be the surveyors, because they can also help translate and provide some information. Because at the end of the day, it's like a lot of these questions will then lead to, where is this housing going to be? How can I apply? And, who do I contact? So I think if we can provide maybe resources at that time, that would be really helpful. Also, I understand the gift card potentially can't be given to everyone, but Menlo Park swag. Here's a little Menlo Park notebook or a pen, just something to represent like the city is here. It's like, we're not just some random person. We're community servers for the city of Menlo Park. And I also would like to get, maybe, I know it's going to be us who are going to do the outreach, but someone to guide us on like what to do or what to say when things go south, because we're not prepared for maybe mental breakdowns or just emotional things that might occur, or even us like maybe feeling attacked by the community. So how can you support us with our mental state as well? Because this is something that it's a lot. It's a lot of questions. It's a lot of time consuming energy from us emotionally and physically. So I was just wondering how are you guys going to support us for this too? Thank you.
Hi, excuse me
But-
real fast. I don't have a hand to put up, so I don't know where I can do that.
Well, if you put your hand up, I can see you now.
Okay, because I have
I'm
my.
sorry. I have one more thing to add. I'm so sorry. So I know you guys are talking about traffic control. So the city just sent out a traffic control survey to the Belhaven community. I'm wondering, like, is that going to be somehow correlated to like the survey that we're administering to? Like, are we like duplicating some of that questionnaire as well?
I have not seen that one. Deanna?
Yeah, it just got extended. It was sent last minute, and it's regarding the traffic control that they're just doing. They just set up a couple of things in the community for bike and for pedestrian. So we just completed it, and I believe they just extended it till I think next week. So I'm just wondering, like, are we duplicating some of those questions? Yeah.
I can, Chair Fennell, would you
Yeah.
like me?
Yeah, please.
Thanks. So I don't have the survey in front of you, but I believe that is probably part of the Belhaven traffic calming project that has been occurring. So they would be separate projects. I think some of the things that we hear and, we're connected, right? What happens in transportation, circulation, land development, housing, improving and enhancing our communities are all connected, but the Belhaven traffic calming study, would be separate from any sort of new programs or policies that we'll be thinking about over the next 18 months or 16 months, maybe. So it's separate.
Thank you. Member Johnson.
Thank you again for those who created the survey. I have a few questions and comments. My first question, Jeff, is how do the answers to these questions will drive change? Will each of these once we get all of these answers, are they going to necessarily and how they're going to impact or drive the housing element project forward? That's my first question. Otherwise, the questions will serve no purpose. The second question I have is, I don't disagree with having that early question as to where you live, like your district, but are you planning to correlate the answers to the district of the responder? That's actually a question. It's not a trick question. I'm just wondering if in your analysis, are you going to tie your conclusions to where that person lives? You're muted, Jeff.
Yes. We want the ability to do that, yes.
Okay. Now,
So-
in respect, you are going to like do an analysis and say, for example, District 1 responders, there was 10 of them and 50% said this or said that. Is that correct?
I mean,
Okay.
that context may not make sense for all the questions, but some of the questions that specifically ask what types of housing would you support in your neighborhood? It would be good to know what part of the town they're coming from.
Okay, so all right, so that's great, because otherwise I was going to say that a lot of the early questions, the answers to them is available through the most latest census that was done in terms of how many people live here, how many own homes, how many are rental, what is percentage of income that people spend, the generalities, and I don't know if it's possible that it's even available by district, because I know every year, and Deanna may remember which report I'm referring to, at the beginning of it, it talks about the demographics of Menlo Park. So that might very well be available. As to the demographics and some of the issues like displacement, for Bellhaven in particular is available in a 2020 study that was actually, how do you call it, commissioned by, or approved at least by the city. It's called Investment and Divestment as Neighbors. The date of the report is January 17, 2020. And it is the study of 3 neighborhoods, East Palo Alto, North Fair Oaks, and Bellhaven, compared to each other and compared to General San Mateo. And that's one of the best reports actually I've seen from the city to date. And it is in that document that I forwarded to everybody. It's one of the hyperlinks. So if you want to find out where it is, that's what it says. And it does talk about how many people, the population, or like the density of number of people per home or per rooms. Talking about 44% of people in Bellhaven or families have families of 4 or more. I mean, people. So that's just another guidance in that area. Regarding some of the questions specifically, one of the things that I was wondering is, for example, when we say question number 13, and we say, where would you like to see housing? Near housing for all stages, maintaining current field of community, location, near schools, near jobs. To me, in a way, that is excluding other neighborhoods, because we all know up in Sharon Heights or further north or in total West Menlo, there are no jobs like they are, let's say, in Bellhaven or along El Camino. So by not including those other neighborhoods, we are actually excluding a possible answer to that question for people to comment on. Similarly, I think you look at question number 16, where should new housing be? I know that in some way it does mention that new housing opportunities in single family residential neighborhoods as the first option, but some of the other neighborhoods are specifically called out for example, near downtown, El Camino Real corridor, but there's no mention of other neighborhoods specifically. So I think, again, we have to be careful that inadvertently we are not excluding certain answers that people may have to want to have those choices. And question 18 doesn't have anything about higher density, right? It talks about triplexes, 6 units or less, accessory units, but nothing about that. Now, going back to your, and I'm talking fast so that because I want to make sure I get through it fast so that, you know, other people have a chance, is you talked about visuals. One of the things that, again, is in my document that I sent to everyone, there is a, how do you call it? There is a link that talks about missing the middle housing, missingmiddlehousing.com. And in that one, they actually portray by pictures the kind of images that people may not have in their mind when you talk about a fourplex or a townhouse or a cottage court or a courtyard building. People have a misperception that, you know, when you have anything more than one house, it's going to be all crammed and yucky looking and whatever. What that website does is actually provides very pleasant images of what higher density, more than one housing per small lot size could look like. So I think you could actually, there are ways of doing surveys where the image is the question, right? Or is the choice. And there's a lot of survey platforms that do that as well. And I just think that will give a different impression to people when they think about the fourplex. But again, people think of it as yucky. I don't know what a better word is for that. And again, lastly, I just urge you to, for all of us, to think about how will the answer to these questions drive action? And that might help us reduce the number of questions. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudi.
Thank you, Member Tronson. So I believe it's going to go Member Mihao.
Thank you.
Or wait, I just want to make sure I remember then Vicky and then Alarvia, just because it's kind of like all sporadic on my screen. But
I also see members Dow and Spalding with hands up, and there's also a community member
yeah, I see that
with a hand up. Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you. So first, I just want to thank everybody on the subcommittee for and the M group for all the work that's already gone into it. Clearly, there's a lot of thought put into this, and I think makes it for easier conversation here. So I really appreciate being able to show up and with a lot of the work already done. So the main thing I wanted to express is that, just trying to put this in the context of kind of what went wrong in the past and what's like the big thing that we're trying to not repeat from past mistakes. And as I understand it, based on what was shared before, is that we just didn't do a great job listening to all the voices, particularly from Belhaven. And so kind of the big question in my mind is like, how are we not going to make that mistake again? And that, I think, brings me to the question of bias, which I think is to be expected. I don't think it's possible to make completely unbiased surveys or any kind of research. So the question is, what are we doing to make sure that we're not biasing in the same way that we've biased in the past? And Member DeSiena just brought up some really good points, and I just want to repeat those, because that to me is exactly the kind of thing that we could accidentally, with very good intentions, make a mistake on and again. And so I wanted, I'm not an expert here, but I wonder if there are ways to step back or ask somebody else to evaluate what we're doing here for bias explicitly, and what are kind of the protocols for doing that, or if anybody on this committee or in the audience sees places like that to call those out. A couple that stood out to me to kind of help contribute to it. Yeah, the educational, the sentences were hard for me to parse. So I think the educational level that the language requires definitely stood out to me too. And then kind of more specific things. So the options, and I guess it'd be helpful to give a specific question number. For question 17, options go all the way to 6+ story buildings. And, we've built those in Belhaven and other places. So it's reasonable that it's there. But then question 18 doesn't include those options, right? Like those are just explicitly excluded. And from little I do know about choice design is that people find safety in the middle, and the outer options are seen as extreme. And that framing of answers make small apartment buildings of 6 units or less sound extreme. And so perhaps having the full set of options so that a small apartment building doesn't look like an extreme choice would help unbias that particular question. I also wanted to bring up in the bias vein. So this is not the survey specifically, but around the focus groups. It might be too late for the focus groups, but in case the same kind of thing comes up with the survey, I want to bring it to your attention. So I really wanted to be a part of focus group, and in the end, looks like I won't be able to. There are two things that I thought made it extra difficult. One is that the time is during workday. And so if you have a job and can't just skip out on the job, then I couldn't be part of the focus group. I don't know if it's different in different districts, but that was the reason I couldn't do it. And the second one was there was initial sign up, but another email with only 24-hour notice to confirm. And so if I missed that, then I assume I'll be disqualified. And I assume there are really good reasons and really thoughtful reasons for doing it that way. It's just that I think it's just really easy accidentally to bias the way we don't want to be biasing given the history here. A couple other quick points. One is around the fear, and I think that's something that comes up in all the sessions, and I think it's hard to figure out how to act on. But there's a question that I just felt. Do you have any fears around displacement from your home? That feels like such a sensitive question, because if you do in fact have a fear, then just like being asked point blank in such a, I would say, and then explain in such a cold and I don't know, it feels frightening to me, and I don't have any fears around displacement from my home. And so if we can be more human and more compassionate in trying to get this kind of information, and maybe even just start with like a yes or no, so that if I don't feel comfortable explaining, at least I can register that like, yes, I do have fears, and perhaps I'm not responding because I don't feel comfortable. And the last small thing, perhaps in the survey length, so much of the demo information is front loaded. Maybe that can actually be the second half of the survey. If you have to keep the length, then at least feels like it kind of more trust building up front before asking all these personal questions without being clear about why we're asking. So maybe like starting with a district, because that's super important to all the other questions first, but the ones that have to do with, how many people in your home and bedrooms and more personal things maybe could go last. But thank you again for your work. And I really hope we can debias this and not accidentally make the mistakes we don't really want to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mihal. Member Robledo.
Thank you, Michael. Let me see, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Michael, for some of your input there. And when he was speaking right now, it made me realize when we're doing a survey, we think about conducting the survey with adults. And what I think is really critical with the survey right now is the youth and the kids living in the house that are capable to do a survey, that are impacted by the stress that their parents are dealing with the potential of being displaced or losing their housing or can't buy a new house or can't. So segue into that is a question that I think is missing. And I'm always speaking on behalf of my community. Are you affected by 451 homes that are due to be built? Because that ties into traffic and pollution. And then are you directly impacted by these cars and this pollution? Those are the type of questions I want to see. Short and sweet and powerful. The other one that's missing, as I said, are you in need of housing? Because when you ask that question and then 451 market rate houses are going up and you can't go for one, that's a pretty good slap in the face and a kick in the face. The other one is a question like, are you impacted by all the construction going on in your community? Right now, they're tearing down walls right here on Willow. You should hear the drilling and the hammering and the dust. I hear it from my house 5 blocks away. I feel so much empathy for those people right next to that. The other question I don't see is, are you seeing a change in your neighborhood? Are you seeing your neighbors moving away? And if so, why? And then a question like, are you interested in participating in meetings? Do you feel you have a voice in this community? Those are the hardcore type of questions I want to know, other than how much money you make. Or, do you own your house or do you rent your house? And then when I think of high density, those are the questions I want to ask people west of 101, because all that high density is coming over here in Belhaven. And a lot of people west of 101 don't have the impact and feel and see. And I wish I could ask them to come spend a week here in Belhaven, now that things are going back to the way they used to be. Now it takes me 20 minutes to get one block away to my house from Willow off of 101. And then, let's see, I think I just want to be sensitive to the fact that the communities are very different. And today when I was on Middlefield, I noticed how many signs are up that says no right turn between a certain hour. We still don't have those here in Belhaven. We've been trying to get those for 2 years. This is the type of disparity and the differences in these communities here. They have all these signs on every single block on Middlefield Road. No right-hand turn here, no turning here. And we can't get them here. Again, we're lucky if we have coverage on our bus stops and they're not in a 5-gallon concrete bucket. Sorry, there's little rats. All right, that's my 2 cents.
Member Robledo.
I understand your data.
Member Vice Chair Alarbi.
Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to address a few things. One, Mihal, I agree. I'm on the survey committee, but I wasn't able to make it work because of work. And I'm not really in the position to kind of say, I gotta step out. So I would like it to be during after business hours if possible. The second thing that has confused me since the first meeting I've attended, or local government meeting, why isn't there like translation? Like interpreters, both Spanish and like sign language. As a social worker, like it's a huge disparity if people cannot understand the meeting, or language is a huge thing that creates an instant barrier. So I think we should make that inclusive, including with the survey. I think it has to be language inclusive. Right now it's language exclusive. The other thing, and I think we need to really state this to the city as a whole. I have not seen any translation, and I'm wondering if anyone else has raised a question for that. I think when you don't have a vehicle, or a way for everyone to understand, it's easy to think that everything's all good, right? A lot of people who don't speak English or read and write English are not exactly, they need to be included. We all need to be included. That's my whole point. And the other part that I do find confusing, if we're all kind of working in concert, meaning all the different commissions, et cetera, then we need to meet. Because right now, I mean, it's like having body parts you don't identify with. Like I have no clue truly what's going on with Housing Commission, Planning, City Council. And I think if we're truly all working together, where's that synergy? Where is the initiative for us all to work together? And the other thing that really rang with me is just about like empathy and just implicit bias. I think it's really hard not to have a bias survey overall, but I do think we can do a better job. But I think that we all need to be pretty positive that we all understand what structural racism is, what implicit and explicit bias is. So it's kind of hard to do all of this if I don't even really know my fellow committee members, because we've only met via Zoom. I can only trust that everyone kind of is doing their homework on the side, and this has to do with the community. So I think in terms of how, if we're met with, a lot of situations, which we will be, right? I'm a social worker. I'm met with things, every second I cannot solve. So do we have a resource line? Can we say, if you are unhappy, write the city council, call. We need like 2 lines, one in Spanish, one in English, and probably maybe a couple other different languages that are in high need. So if we're met with this type, what are our resources? What can the community really do to say, I really want my voice to be heard? Then I'm also on board with, I think if you do the survey, you get a gift card. I think we all should be armed with 50 or more, because we need to take an accurate sample of our community. We can't just have like, a total of 35 surveys. We really need like, if we have 40,000 people, I would say we need the say-so of like 4,000 people. That would be my wish list. And to me, that can also be accomplished via phone calls, not just door to door, phone calls, large groups of people getting together. But my biggest issue is, why will there be change now? Why is it really going to be meaningful? I want to feel like there will be change. If not, I think it's a hard pill to swallow to talk to multiple people. And because I want to know, if they ask me, well, during the last housing element, what happened? My answer is, I don't know. 8 years before that, I don't know. Before that, I don't know. I can't keep saying structural racism. Are we going to dismantle it? To me, housing is the foundation for all of these things. Without housing, it's really hard to have anything else. And I think we can remix some of the questions that become more inclusive, but I think being able to say, yes, housing is going to be here, and this is the many different ways. These are the different mixed incomes. I think that the survey should be completely anonymous, period. And I do think it should be inclusive of all age groups, because as a social worker, the folks that are most traumatized by being unhoused and, is our children. They're the ones that won't ever persevere if they have only couch surfed all their life. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Vice Chair Alarvia. I believe Member Spalding was next.
Thank you. So a few other, one point that I forgot to make earlier and a few other things that come up. I still feel that there's a little bit of jargon on this, and other members have brought this up, but particularly I really wonder how many of the respondents will fully know what, say, an accessory dwelling unit is and really understand what these types of housing are that are referred to in, let's say, like question 17. There was the idea that I think Member Tronson brought up of having pictures or illustrations of them, which could help. Also, that could, there could be other issues with that. Beyond that is, I think that, or I think the intent here is that the survey is to be one of several instruments that are used. And a number of people, including myself, have brought up that it would be valuable to have more open-ended questions and to allow more flexibility of people to communicate their concerns. But perhaps the survey is not the right instrument for that. So the question that I have is, how does the survey fit in with other ways of gathering feedback, and perhaps ones that are more free form or could allow people to more freely communicate their concerns? And how can we use the survey or the interaction that we have with people when we're giving them the survey to help direct them to these other instruments, whether they're community meetings or hotlines to contact the community or the members of City Hall? What can we do to encourage them and to make sure that they feel heard in ways that they may not feel heard if they're just filling out the survey? Let's see. And then, I'm sorry, I forgot my third point, so I'll just stop it at that.
Thank you, Member Spalding. Member Dow.
Well, first I want to check, I know some of the attendees have their hand raised for a while.
We could open, we can ask Cal Chan to open public comment and go to them, and then we can come back to us. Cal Chan, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we have two members of the public who have raised their hands. At this time, I'll call on those two members of the public to provide their public comment. The first person I would like to call on is a phone number ending in 3859, and then second following that would be Lynn Bramlett, and third would be Kelsey Baines. Phone number ending in 3859, you have the ability to provide your public comment to the CEOC at this time. Please go ahead. So phone number ending in. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. This is Pam Jones. I'm a resident in District 1, the residential area. And I just want to thank the committee members for your comments, because they are so pertinent to the situation that we have. I want to start with reiterating the challenge with language. And I was told in another meeting, the Housing Commission meeting, that a part of what's happening now is that the translation is not in Spanish because there's relying on the online Google translator that comes up with every page. It doesn't translate the documents, but at least it tells you what's on the page. And I don't know whether or not that language is appropriate for all, Spanish speakers. I have a question about how are we going to capture the displaced residents. I'm concerned about those that have been forced out, particularly in the last 3 years since the investment disinvestment report was done. And we know there's a substantial change because my neighbors do not look like they used to. And I also would like to suggest that you look at the people that have applied for rent assistance. That might help you to know the number of people that are in danger of being displaced. And that is really a hard question because probably the 65% of the renters over here have a concern about displacement. The questions about seeing, housing, more housing in your area, when it comes to Belhaven, I know that many of the residents here want to house their family. So we are the highest density population in Menlo Park, but people here would be willing to put an accessory dwelling on their property if they could get a waiver from the city, from the Planning Commission, which would make those that do not want to have a more diverse community by, for example, allowing duplexes next door to them. We see how strong the single family housing group is, and especially since they're still using that terminology where they want to maintain the character of their neighborhood, the character of Menlo Park. So that tells us who we're dealing with. And so phrasing our questions in such a way that we're going to capture all of the areas where housing can be built. And in some cases, it's going to be regardless of whether those people like it or not, because that's the only place left to do the building. And I hope that SRI, that you consider doing 6-story buildings, 8-story buildings. That's what we're going to have over here surrounding Belhaven. And so if it's good enough for Belhaven, it's good enough for the rest of the city. Anyway, keep up the good work. And again, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker will be Lynn Bramlett. Lynn Bramlett, you're able to provide your comment to the CEOC at this time.
Yes, I'm Lynn Bramlett, speaking for myself, though I am a member of a grassroots-based disaster prep group. First, I too appreciate your very thoughtful discussion and suggestions. As to my feedback in my limited time, I consider the survey very housing focused. I would like to see a stronger focus on safety and environmental justice. I have 3 key points. First, before adding survey questions for safety, I think the public needs to weigh in on what it would like our safety element to cover. I see the 2 questions as narrowing options. I would like to see Menlo Park develop a disaster preparedness and safety element like the one developed by the city of Berkeley. That kind of element would be more integrated with the city's other planning efforts, such as their update to the city's 2001-6 local hazard mitigation plan. The earlier point is well taken about the body parts, but maybe not all part of a human, kind of extending the metaphor. I agree completely. Earthquakes also need to be included in the survey. The most catastrophic disaster facing Menlo Park would be an eruption of the Hayward Fault, which will most impact the Belhaven community. My second point is that the environmental justice element is also critically important. SB 1000 environmental justice law was passed to redress land use decisions such as the one in the Connect Menlo process. That concentrated development in a small area of Menlo Park, roughly 5% of the overall land mass size. The environmental justice law can be your friend to address a number of the concerns I heard tonight. I'm concerned about the few survey questions on this topic. I ask if it wouldn't help to have more of a briefing on this law. As the California Attorney General website notes, low-income communities and communities of color often bear a disproportionate burden of pollution and associated health risks. Environmental justice seeks to correct this inequity by reducing the pollution experienced by these communities and ensuring their input is considered in decisions that affect them. And so a key element of this law is the transparency, the public engagement, elements like language use when you reach out to people and so forth. So I would Google that. You go to the Attorney General's website, you're going to see complaint letters issued to cities who aren't following all elements of this law. So I just urge you to get acquainted if you aren't. So I think it needs more input from the public and more consideration. Finally, I agree, the survey is very long. I would put more demographics at the end, and I would also test it. Thank you for your good work.
Thank you for your comments. The next commenter is Kelsey Baines. Kelsey Baines, you have the ability to provide your comment now.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelsey Baines. I am with a group called Peninsula for Everyone. We advocate for a more inclusive and sustainable peninsula by pushing for policies to build more homes at all income levels, have better transportation, and protecting tenants from displacement. And Peninsula for Everyone is part of a coalition effort, a statewide coalition effort called the Campaign for Fair Housing Elements, where we are enforcing fair housing laws in local city planning in the upcoming housing element cycle. So I have been really impressed with the discussion that I've seen so far from this group. I think this is potentially like a process for other cities to model in terms of having a committee that is really dedicated to community outreach and really thinking through how to be inclusive in this planning process, which is so fundamental to fair housing, to have a fair process that is really inclusive and captures the perspectives of the whole community, not just the community that has the know-how and the wealth of time to be able to figure out all these confusing planning terms. So I have just really appreciated many of the comments from this working group. And the only additional suggestions I would have is to really pay a lot of close attention to the language, even using the term single family residential has a certain connotation relative to making the point that single family only is what the zoning does, or something that takes out the word family and it is simply represented by a single detached house and doesn't quite have the same like emotional baggage. And then the other thing I would pay attention to is just the ranges on questions. The highest density option only goes up to like a mid-rise, and certainly like if that's your maximum, if you're not even asking people what they think about high rises, it might generate a certain kind of response type. So I would include things at the high range in addition to things at the low range. And then I also just wanted to make the point that ADUs are already allowed in all single family neighborhoods. So something to consider there is that change has already happened, although maybe it would be interesting to hear from the community about that. But just agree with a lot of the comments already made, and thank you for your care and attention to making sure this is an inclusive process where all voices are being heard. Thank you.
I think Cal's muted, if you didn't know that.
Is he muted? I can't see
Yeah,
him.
it said that he was talking at the top, but then I couldn't hear him.
I just noted that there are no other public comments at this time. So returning it back to you, Chair Fennell. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Member Dow?
Thank you. I just want to say, well, a couple things. I really appreciate the broad topics that were covered in the survey itself. I know it takes a lot of it sounded like you did a lot of work to go from 40 to 26, and there are always good questions you want to keep in, but I also really appreciate the broad input that we've gotten from the membership and from the attendees. I think this is, to Kelsey's point, is the exact process that we need to do to kind of make sure we are incorporating different perspectives. So I really appreciate the process. I do think it's really difficult to kind of thread the needle of, you hear feedback about, well, we need to include more perspectives, but also make it shorter, but also get to the point, but also make sure we don't leave out a lot of values or other priorities that may be needed. So I do recognize and acknowledge the difficulty of the situation. And I wanted to offer maybe some ways that we could help kind of, I don't know, prioritize what we want to do with the survey. One is just kind of acknowledging that if the survey itself is trying to understand what the community values and priorities are, it may help to kind of focus some of those questions a little bit more on that. I think a lot of the questions are great in terms of just reaction, but in terms of what people want to see, like around the question 16 through 18 around like what types of housing, I'll acknowledge I don't know what the implications of those things are. So on top of not knowing exactly what all those things mean, I also don't know what the implications are. So I don't know if there's a way to structure the questions such that they speak to density, to Member Johnson's point. I think is Member Johnson. Sorry if that was another member. And just or like traffic or safety or things like that. And if we could hone the question such that they speak to the value and then response to things that are happening that might get to the heart of the questions and maybe what we're trying to report out as a part of this committee of saying, hey, we talked to the community, or we got their input and they're really concerned about X, Y, and Z pieces as a reaction to plans or maybe looking ahead. And then I think the second part, I just recognize that also the demographic questions are probably aimed at making sure that when we do ask for feedback that we're getting, and we're making sure that we're getting a variety of feedback from our population, the group. So yeah, I would also suggest moving them to the end and maybe, making the questions that people are hot topics at the front. So it kind of grabs them and then carries them through the rest. And then I also do acknowledge the point of the two attendees, Pamela and Lynn, of just making sure that there are maybe more questions around safety or environmental, or just kind of making sure it's a little bit more balanced as things are going to be built, or as more housing will be provided or built. Environmental and safety are pretty big issues. So just making sure that we are giving equal attention would probably be helpful as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Dow. I believe Member McMahon is next.
Yeah, so I am just really find this just to be a great conversation with all sorts of content that I had that I think is so important for this questionnaire, from both process, language, concerns, setting expectations, supporting people who are concerned and think some action will happen based on a question that's asked, on and on and on. It's a huge amount of information that's come into this meeting. What I have a concern about is how is what's being said here and taped here in this conversation, how is that going to translate into the next iteration of the questionnaire? Because this conversation has been so rich and so nuanced. If I was the person who had to type and was the owner of the physical questionnaire, I'd be throwing my hands in the air saying, oh my gosh, we got to start over again. And so my question is maybe to M Group, maybe to the city, maybe it's to subcommittees and to us at the CEOC. what happens with this? I want to make sure that all this gets captured and driven back into the questionnaire, you know, like later tonight, you know, I wish, and then the final thing I would say or ask is this questionnaire just kind of like a probe to find some basic, you know, dimensions that are then going to be explored and researched and driven upon to figure out what the real answers are or the real needs are in the community? Is this just a starting point, or is this taken as, you know, a major component of everything that's going to be then fed into the Housing Commission? Those are my questions and my points.
Thank you, Member McMahon. Member DeSiena.
Thank you. So I have two things to bring up. Number one is now that we're talking a little bit about adding more questions or going into more details with some of the questions regarding like environmental concerns or traffic or even housing code enforcement, will we have or will someone be present maybe to address those questions? Going back to Vice Chair Nhezi's comment about we are unaware of those answers, and you know, we might not look like the appropriate person even to do the survey if we can't even answer a question regarding the survey itself. And number two would be how can we add possibly a disclaimer noting that this is a survey, this is not a promise to housing, because some people might see it as a way as like, oh wow, like something's happening in my community, and maybe by me filling out the survey, I might be that lucky person that might get housing. Or it's like, I don't want to give hope to a community that's been just asking for hope and asking for so much and not be given anything or not be even eligible for this housing. So I'm just wondering, is there a way we can add a disclaimer where it's like, this is just information we need from the community? Thank you.
Thank you, Member DeSiena. Member Tronson.
What is the goal in terms of number of surveys? Just for the survey, not focus group, just this one. Is it 300? Is it 30? Is it 500? When do you consider this a successful project with regard to the survey component? How many respondents?
Is that for Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Fennell, Jeff Bradford Group. I have a list of about 20 questions. Do you want me to try to go through them all or just answer them?
No, I'm sorry, Jeff. My question was, how many respondents to this particular survey or its edited version would you consider it a success? How many, if you get 100 people to respond to this survey, 500, we got 2,000 people in Menlo Park, what do you consider a success?
I think percentage-wise, a fairly low percentage could still be considered successful. Our Survey Monkey maxes out at 5,000 responses. If we exceeded that, I think that would be a good problem to have. I think it'll be less than 5,000. If it's less than 1,000, I would feel like it wasn't enough.
Okay.
So I would, me personally, without like crunching the numbers, I would, a city the size of Menlo Park, a survey that has this much thought and effort put into it, I would like to see a larger percentage, or like if we got less than 1,000, I think it would not be great.
I do agree. I'm assuming that you have already picked a particular method of analysis to go along with this survey, correct? And usually that requires a certain minimum N for a survey to be acceptable, or to yield any reasonable or with some level of confidence. So it would be good to know what that is. And as somebody mentioned, to test this out, I think Lynn mentioned, to kind of test the survey after it's been modified, perhaps. Because when I looked at last week's, I think it was last week's engagement, there was a session about housing element, right? There, at the time when I looked at it after the fact, there was only 8 views. So we are not getting the traction even with our engagement aspects of informational sessions. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a communication expert, but we do need to do something because, like I said, last week was only at 8 views and one of them was me.
Oh, absolutely. And
thank you.
Chair Fennell, do you want me to
Yeah, go ahead.
do a more extended response to the great discussion the committee's had?
Yes.
Listening to the conversation and going back and looking at the survey, it did make me realize we probably went a little crazy on the demographic questions. In a perfect world, you know, we would get all that information and we could slice it and dice it and share results based on that. Strictly speaking, we don't need it. Someone mentioned census data, and that is a real thing. So we could really pare down the demographic questions and make it more approachable for the community, make it easier for people garnering in-person results. I do think the great majority of the results, if it's successful, are going to be done on a computer electronically. We do plan on having M-Group staff facilitate paper-based surveys at a variety of different locations and events. So we're not dismissing paper-based surveys, but I do think to get the kind of numbers we want and the kind of response rate we want, most of that is maybe people clicking on the boxes on their computer or their phone. But we do have to keep in mind that the paper version needs to be legible and readable, which means we really need 2 different versions. We need a computer-based version and then a paper-based version designed to be effective on those different mediums. And we can definitely go back and work with the subcommittee and tilt more of the questions away from the demographic information, which was kind of in the nice to have category, but not absolutely required, and bring more balance between the housing, the safety, and the environmental justice questions that has come up as a theme. And testing it is huge. We definitely want to do that before we send this out to the whole city and get some people who are not involved in it to take the survey and tell us what's confusing, what needs to be fixed from the choices offered, the write-in fields, language usage, all of that. And it'll definitely be translated into Spanish.
Member Tronson, is your hand still up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you just recap who are on the committee or subcommittee for the survey?
Yeah, I have that in my
Oh, Dan, okay.
It's a member McMahon, member Feldman, a member Lavia, and member Vicky Robledo.
If there is any room and subject to Michal agreeing to it, I would really recommend Michal for you to join as well. I think you and Dan has a lot of survey, not just survey, but it appears that you have a lot of quantitative data analysis kind of experience, or at least it appears that way. So that might be very useful. I don't know, just a suggestion.
Member Vicky.
I just wanted to, remember when this meeting is going till 8, because I thought it said 7. And we're going on 7:30. But anyway, so I was gonna just say something in regards to what Lynn was saying about disaster preparedness. I know for me in my community, people like incentives to complete surveys. And when I just heard Jeff say that the M group is going to be handling these surveys, it sort of concerns me, because it's like, then you got to have familiar faces in the community to have people want to respond. Okay, so no offense to the M group, but I don't know how responsive they're going to be in my community when you want to knock on their door to get it completed. The other thing is, what comes to my mind is the disaster preparedness combination that Lynn brought up. That what a wonderful idea if we could give a disaster preparedness kit to everybody who gathered to complete the survey. Unfortunately, Bellhaven doesn't have a community center anymore because they're tearing it down. But I think it could be a really great idea to give disaster preparedness kits to people who come to one location to complete the survey. And then we sort of have a captive audience at that point. And then the last thing I was thinking about is when we're talking displacements and a lot of the renters. I mean, unfortunately, in the last 2 weeks, 2 people in my neighborhood moved. They were renters. And one of the things I think we overlook is renters. Sometimes you got slumlords, and sometimes you have renters that don't take care of it. But if there's incentives to present to landlords that will do repairs for you, like a Rebuilding Together comes in and they do the repairs free with a stipulation that they let that renter stay there for a period of 5 more years with the option to buy it possibly. Because then that works on retaining the people that live here already. As one of the callers, Pam Jones, stated, you know, the face of her neighbors is changing quite a bit. And that concerns me because I know why I moved here, and I moved here for the diversity of my community. So I think when we get these surveys going, we should really look at areas that we can gather the community, maybe have barbecues. I like the disaster preparedness, and have that incentive. The other thing is brought up before, and I've never gotten any answers. What happened to the previous housing element surveys that were conducted? Dina had brought that up, had been brought up before. I'm sure most of those survey questions are just as relevant now. The other question was, we bring up things, but then they're not addressed at the next meetings. It's like, I wish we could have a method in which everything that people have brought up of concerns, they get addressed and answered. Because we throw a lot of things around and then that's it. We don't hear any resolution out of it. And so I had brought up getting some kids to maybe go work with the Boys and Girls Clubs and say, hey, we'll give the kids $10 to ride around the community and get some surveys. Of course, they have to be a certain age. I don't know about the liability, but we get them involved in the community. We get them involved in just actively being, because you know, the youth are important, their input. I'm talking maybe youth from 15 on up, where they can, you know, understand what the impact is. I just think there's a lot of different incentives we need to look at creatively when we're conducting these surveys, if we really want to have a positive impact in that mixture of the community that is, to me, really, really critical. Thank you.
Member McMahon.
Did you call me?
Yes.
So what Victoria just said, yes, yes, more yes, and more yes. That's my first comment. I think I heard M Group say that primarily this is going to be online, and if I misheard that, I apologize, but I vehemently disagree with that approach. Yeah, that's a way to reach a lot of people with computers who are used to taking online surveys and stuff, but I think getting into the community is critical. And unfortunately, the community center is not in the state that it needs to be, but you know, any public library, any grocery store, any place where you can canvass people and not only get the answers to the questionnaire and simplify it if we fill it out for them by asking them, you know, having one person ask the questions, one person filling it out, and then capturing those little items that aren't in the questionnaire that might be really critical and point us in new directions, or the committees in new directions as well. And then I want to circle back on Victoria's last point about, or third point about disaster preparedness and kits and things like that. Well, maybe we don't have the resources, or the city doesn't have the resources or to spend on creating disaster kits, or we don't find those, but maybe there's simple things that could be done. Like a plan worksheet that is filled out and worked on with each person who takes the survey, that you then emboss or put it in a folder or something like that. So it's like your call tree, what to do, just how to set up a plan so that you are in a better shape than you would have been if you didn't have the plan. So simple, maybe there's simple little things that are more sweat oriented that can have a big positive impact, and people take away and say, oh, this is really useful. It's something I knew I would have to know, but just having it all right here is a great thing. A call sheet, things like that. So anyway, I just want to strongly urge M Group, and maybe we're the ambassadors to go out there and do this work, to actually be, the shoes on the ground, the sneakers on the ground, walking around doing this. But I really urge getting into the community and make, the simplest way to fill out a questionnaire is to have someone ask you the questions and someone else write it down. So I urge that as a major approach to gathering this information. Thanks.
Vice Chair Alarvia, and I'm also just going to bring up to everyone, we do have two other agenda items that we need to get to as well.
I just had a quick comment about the survey questions, because I like the idea of using the census, but I guess I think I need more clarity on how this information will be synthesized and what we gather from the survey, what will it exactly inform? Because one way, yeah, a lot of these questions could be very interesting in a group setting to get people engaged, because I think a lot of the issues about the neighborhoods being so different, and I hear some people that live certain areas of Menlo Park don't even go downtown Menlo Park. So I think if there's some sort of relationship building going on, so some trust can be cultivated through some of these questions. Because I think a lot of people, kind of what Vicky's saying, and I feel this way as a resident with the city council meetings, I make public comment, but I never get feedback. Sometimes it's kind of cherry pick what's responded to and what's not. I think we all deserve, some feedback. We get that we're in a different format, but how can we get closer and closer to how a live city council meeting would be when there is more dialogue? Because right now it just feels like, the public makes comments and that's it. And we just leave it there. So I wanted to know, what information are we using? How are we synthesizing it? Because I know with research, someone who is a researcher, we can, you can always create a survey to reflect, a certain thesis, right? So I just want to know, how are we looking at this survey? What are we using from it? And how would this also be made to the public so they can see, this is the survey you took and this is the results. And are we all on the same page or close to the same page of kind of getting common ground? But I think, it's a little problematic to not understand what we're going to do with this survey. Because I think that the biggest question that I've been asked, is this survey going to really change anything? Or is it just kind of another gesture that will just be out there, but nothing's being done, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Member Johnson.
I agree with the Vice Chair, and I think that was one of the first things that I asked is, how will these questions and their answers to them drive action? If questions and data doesn't drive action, is not a useful activity. It's just activity, it's not productivity. So it would be really important for us to understand how each questions, or at least a set of questions, will actually impact the decision toward the housing element design, as well as its implementation. And right now, we don't know that. Chair, I understand that we have very limited time. There's few other things that I would really appeal to the committee to actually decide upon tonight. And that is, we only have one subcommittee. At this rate, we will never get anything done. It's been a month and a half, I believe, since our last meeting. We only had one subcommittee. I would appeal to the staff as well to drive subcommittee formation with the, of course, with the buy-in from the chair and vice chair, so that we don't have to delay certain activities, because you can send questionnaires to the committee members and say, rank choice vote 3 subcommittees you want to be on, and then we can decide, and they can meet offline. They don't have to meet in, because, you know, under the certain number of members, you can do that because a district is very small. And as part of that one of the subcommittees perhaps could be the one that is compiling all of the various issues that the members have brought up. Like, for example, how do we correlate this committee versus the commission's activity? How does the input output gets, you know, merged together? And then a whole bunch of other stuff. So I like, if we can't do the subcommittee formation tonight, I would request the staff to send us a questionnaire, like BCC questionnaire, and then we can respond back as to what subcommittees we think should be formed. Right away, the next day, get that turned around, and then have a poll as to who wants to be on, let's say, 3 committees ranked choice, you know, voting kind of a situation. And then my other request is that for future meetings, first of all, I'm happy and ready to participate in weekly, twice a week, whatever it takes to make this worthwhile. Otherwise, it's just activity. Is that when we get these agendas moving forward, that we actually, just like we got a copy of the survey, that we actually get copies of those reports. Because if there is a report, unless it's just totally oral, which really doesn't serve as good of an impact as if it were written, let's get that ahead of time so we can think about it. I know the danger is that we gonna have lots of questions and comments, but at least we have read them ahead of time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Member DeSiena.
I just wanted to add to Member Victoria Robledo's comment about getting the youth involved. Bellhaven Action here in Bellhaven did an amazing job at recruiting teens in our community. And I think that we can possibly look into doing that. And as far as Member Dan McMahon's comment about the disaster preparedness, I know a couple communities here in Menlo Park have a CERT disaster member for their communities. And I think my neighbor is our I guess our person here in Bellhaven. So I think like tapping into them to maybe provide resources or any information that might be needed, because it is someone of the community that maybe people feel more comfortable talking to regarding those matters. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Member DeSiena. I think this would be a good time for us to move on to the next item. And then we will figure out a way to do a time check, because I know some folks have the little ones and want to be cognizant of that. So for the next D3, review and provide feedback on upcoming community outreach activities. Sung Kwong to introduce the item. Or Deanna, were you going to? I just saw you pop up.
Yeah, sorry, Chair Fennell. I know there were a number of questions that were raised, and I know we're running short on time, but I feel that it's important that we do address some of the questions and sort of the next steps for the survey. Just it is, you know, a big part of our next step in our outreach before Sung gets into some of the more outreach activities. And so I just want to close the loop on, you know, I think there's questions about like, what are we doing with this information? You know, how are we going to get the word out about the survey? You know, potentially another subcommittee meeting. So I just hoping we can just spend a few more minutes to close some of those points, discuss some of those points, address some, the questions that we received, so that we know how we're proceeding, if that's okay, before we jump to the next
sure.
one. Okay, great. I think Jeff was going to.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Chair Fennell. The question we had in the very beginning, and then the question at the very end about what's going to happen with all this information, how is it going to affect policy, how can we represent that to the people we're asking to participate. And the analogy I liked that I heard from Member McMahon was this is sort of an initial approach to the community. Here's some ideas, here's some issues. These are some typical housing problems we need to hear about in terms of which ones are most affecting you as the survey respondent. And then the results of that allows us to then, as we go forward, kind of refine our approach. For example, question number 16 is very kind of just open-ended. Where should new housing be located in Menlo Park? And then there's, there's 6 or 7 answers plus a write-in. And if people just go crazy for use of religious institution parking lots as allowed by state law, that scores off the chart. In numerous districts, then we can really lean into a strategy like that. If people are really crazy for more accessory dwelling units, obviously the public speaker mentioned, hey, those are already legal, they're already allowed, a state law takes care of that, but there's still things the city can do to actually promote them, right? It's not enough to just say that they're allowed, so we're just going to step back and allow homeowners to decide whether they want to do one or not. There's things cities can do to actually incentivize people to do ADUs. So if we see, there's broad support for certain strategies, we can really focus on those and develop more specific programs and policies to encourage them. If people are adamantly opposed to new housing opportunities in single-family residential neighborhoods, that's good to know. But under the fair housing laws and under environmental justice, we need to seriously explore housing opportunities throughout the entire city. But it'll be good to know if there's a 60% opposition to that or 99% opposition to that. But that doesn't necessarily in and of itself say we can't explore the policy in that direction. But we'll be armed with the knowledge, and we'll tell the Housing Commission, the Planning Commission, the City Council, this would address equity and allow for the development of a balanced and fair and inclusive community. But X percentage of your residents are not in favor of it. So at least they know. And we can come back and we can refine these approaches and make them more legible, more understandable to the people as we go into our other events, where we can have more of those open-ended conversations, and we can paint a fuller picture of what some of these things might look like. So I saw that as sort of like the big question I wanted to answer, but I know there were some other ones that were equally important.
I can call a member Larvia. Member Larvia. Oh, you're muted.
You can actually skip me.
Okay.
You can come back to me.
Jeff, were you finished or?
Yeah, Deanna, was there another specific question or two you wanted to close the loop on?
Yes, thank you. So I think there was a suggestion if perhaps maybe the subcommittee meet again to look at the refined survey before we issue it. I think that would be a good next step. I know we're looking to get the survey out fairly soon to help inform some of our future conversations that Jeff was just mentioning about identifying strategies and policies. So this collection of information will help inform that. So we do, but I do think in taking in this information today is very helpful, and we appreciate the very thoughtful comments and want to make sure that we're addressing them. And I think if we are able to have another subcommittee meeting and the subcommittee feels, and if the full CEOC feels that the subcommittee, if we get the thumbs up from them, then we can go ahead and move forward with the survey, issue the survey. And we can work offline to schedule that meeting with the subcommittee. But wanted to hear others or other ideas if there
are. Vice Chair Alarvia.
Sorry, I forgot my point. I wanted to ask, so what can we share on Nextdoor? Could I create a housing element group as another way to outreach? Because Nextdoor is used by a lot of people that that we normally probably would not interact with, at least not myself. And if so, I don't mind creating a group and sharing exactly what the housing element's about, I think a lot of people are still confused, and that could at least reach the next door audience in terms of like what's going on. And I think also with the subcommittee, let's say, you know, we remix questions, blah, blah, blah. I think it would be appropriate to send it out to the entire committee for review. I think a lot of people have interest, but may not have the time, or, you know, may not want to commit to an extra commitment. But if we send it to everyone for feedback, almost like a Google Doc, because they gave me the ability to view it because I couldn't make the meeting. I think that would be helpful if everyone had the same access, because we're kind of whittling down. We're no longer, what, 14 people, or I'm not sure what's going on with that. We're losing a little steam. So maybe to pick up some steam, let's get the word out next door, and just let me know what are the parameters around that and what can be shared. You know, obviously it's a public meeting, but I wanted to see if we could create some traction on Nextdoor.
Thank you, Vice Chair Alarvia. I believe Member Tronson was next.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Deanna. So Deanna, in the past and also today, I mentioned regarding other subcommittees. Can you please assist us in a very timely fashion to create other subcommittees by email or other means that doesn't require in-person meeting? Because obviously we won't have time again today. We didn't have time last time to create other subcommittees either, but we desperately need to tackle so many different sub issues or sub components beyond just the survey.
Sure. So I can answer your question. I want to make sure we also answer Vice Chair Larvia's question as well. So, I mean, to create subcommittees, I'm interested in what the group would like to create subcommittees on. Certainly the survey is a big component of our outreach effort. Are there other topic areas that the group is interested in? I do think that we should have that conversation open versus having doodle polls outside of the meeting. So that
well, yes, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, if we had the time, and we keep running out of time because we don't have frequent enough meetings, I think at this point, I personally like to have a subcommittee on the components of housing element, how they fit together. Today, just today alone, we heard from several members that they're still curious about the last housing element, what happened, what made it so that it didn't meet the goals that it had set. And again, I'm not talking about policy making, please don't get me wrong, but about the information flow that this committee needs in order to give back feedback to the staff and the city, because that's what we're here for. And that is currently lacking. So to me, that is one of the crucial subcommittees that need to be performed or created, created. It's a little bit broader than just, let's say, survey or focus group or, you know, community van or whatever it is. But it's a different angle, it's a different perspective. And as doing that, we may decide, well, that's too much and we have to further subcommitteeize, you know, do more subcommittees. But, you know, other people may have different things that they wish or think that it, so I think you should leave that to the people to think about it and let you know, and then let the members of the committee decide what they want to form. It's their committee after all. And but again, timeliness right now, we are not moving fast enough because of the, you know, rapid schedule that you guys have deadlines to meet. And we want to do our best to provide that content. And I will yield to you, to the staff, for giving us an update about Housing Commission. But from my listening to it, there wasn't much of a feedback from Housing Commission to us in terms of what have they done, when do they plan to do their postmortem, what are the zones, when are the zones, where are the sites going to be selected? None of that is right now available to us. And we need to know that. So maybe you have all of those answers based on the report. Thank you, Deanna.
Sure, thank you. And yes, I think Sung will be able to help provide kind of the next steps and what our outreach is. And I think a lot of the questions that you have is we haven't done that work yet. And so that's why there's not a lot of update regarding site selection and whatnot. So that is a process that is to come. But I just want to circle back to Vice Chair Alarvia's question about next door. So yeah, as individual members, you can post on behalf of yourself. If you want to represent the CEOC, then this body should charge you with that to go on to Nextdoor. So it's up to you how it's, I guess, designed. It's like I'm one member of the speaking on behalf of myself, and I'd like to get this group together, or I'm speaking for the CEOC. And that might be a longer conversation too. So I wanted to provide that feedback.
So what will we do, Nancy? Will we take a vote on that? Like, will we take, and then maybe we can just do an overall subcommittee where all the stuff we're not getting done in these meetings because of time constraints, we can have an overall subcommittee that could handle things not addressed in the meeting. And then if everyone is comfortable with me, if everyone just is comfortable with me being on Nextdoor representing our committee, please let me know, or maybe that can be a part of the subcommittee. And then I can get direction on, how to word things. And I would ask that whoever is Spanish speaking, maybe we can work together so we can do like 2 different versions. Because I do think there's like a lot of folks on Nextdoor that would love to be updated.
Thanks. If I can just clarify, I'm getting some clarification. So I think on Nextdoor, the city can post on Nextdoor, as I think we discussed before. Oftentimes we can't see the responses, but we can post out. But in terms of representing on Nextdoor, I'm getting clarification that it would be you, I guess, speaking on behalf of yourself and not representing
That's okay.
the city. I'm sorry?
No, I'm sorry.
I don't understand. So are you saying, like, if I make a comment that's my opinion, make sure I provide a disclaimer saying this is only what I feel? Or are you saying just overall in general? Because I was just going to create a group just so people are aware that we're going through this process and there's another way to be involved. I wasn't really into trying to get into like some sort of public commentary about housing in Menlo Park. I think we're all pretty clear on what's going on. So that's not my interest. My interest is getting the word out so people can involve.
Okay, I mean, that sounds
So I would say that's like 2 different motions, if I'm clear.
I don't even think it is a motion. I think it's if you're just, representing yourself and getting the word out about the housing, hey, participate in housing. I don't necessarily think that's a motion.
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, I think myself and a person on the committee that writes Spanish, we should come up with a housing element group, 1 in English, 1 in Spanish, that provides what we're up to. And then if a conversation ensues, I think our role would be to help facilitate it, but not necessarily give our opinion. I think my opinion, if anyone's been following some of the meetings, is I don't think anyone would be confused about my opinion, and several of us. So I think it's more so about purely outreach and truly another vehicle to reach folks. And then subcommittee would just be a subcommittee so we can, because I think one thing at least I'm feeling and several other members are feeling, it's like we're kind of being told how to outreach opposed to being completely a part of the process. It's like there's something going on that it doesn't feel extremely organic all the time, I would say.
Okay.
I'm going to call on Member McMahon.
So I'm going to jump back to Nahezi's 2 points ago, because I really would urge that the questionnaire document be made available to the entire CEOC to make comments on. I found that a pretty easy way to get that down quickly. And then I would also, so what I'm suggesting as well is that the subcommittee meets again soon, very soon, to take the input and to try to translate that into changes in the current questionnaire. and also reserving, some subset or all of us calling on individuals that were in this meeting to further clarify what they meant when they said things. Because I'm convinced that we could take this entire video of this entire conversation, put it into a video editor, and track and transcribe everything that happened. And there's still a lot of nuance that we wouldn't capture putting it into that. So I would highly recommend that the subcommittee meets soon. And then has direct interactions with the remaining 5 members here in the meeting that gave input that aren't on the committee. So that's my 2 cents.
Can I also just do a time check? Just because I think we only have 9 members here, and so what is the status of the time? Because it's pretty much 8 o'clock.
Let's wrap it up.
Yes, we are going to, we want to wrap it up here. So I'm hearing, I have some hesitations about doing a Google Docs. I will confirm whether or not that we can actually do that offline, because everyone's going to be interacting and seeing each other's information. I know it's a survey, not but I'm just going to confirm that, but definitely we will have a follow-up subcommittee meeting. So we will reach out separately to the subcommittee to find a time for us to meet. And then we will go from there. So we can, in the interest of time, move to the next set of.
I'm sorry, Deanna, and I apologize, Chair, for just jumping. You still have not responded to my request from previous meetings and this meeting that we need additional subcommittees beyond the survey. Even if it's focus group, we have no insight. The staff did a focus group or is going to do a focus group. We have never seen what that focus group is going to be made of. I mean, what is these elements of that focus group? We haven't seen that. And I personally feel that I'm still very blinded. I'm working in a blind zone as to what is the overall process for housing element so I can engage appropriately. I understand that the sites have not been selected. I'm just using that as one single example, but I have no idea when those are going to be selected. So if somebody asks me, when are the sites going to get selected? What is the process for that selection? This is not about me or the committee making those policies, but there's nothing that says we should not be informed about that general detail. I'm sure M Group, with its credibility and its expertise, and they've done so many of these for so many cities, already knows what the process is to the nth degree of the details. Why are we not being informed of that level of detail so we know what the overall project is? When I go to school, all my years, I cannot just read chapter by chapter. I have to know what the total syllabus is like so I can put the chapters in context. At this point, I'm just blind. I have no idea what's going to get done when and what effort is going to feed into what. And I respect your guys' expertise, the staff and M Group, that you guys already know what's going to happen and when. I'm just asking you to please share that with us. We can handle it.
Might I just ask, because I know I believe we all got an email of someone else asking about subcommittees. Does anyone have ideas of subcommittees that they feel that we need right now?
I think I mentioned mine. I think another subcommittee could be potentially working on communication with the Housing Commission. This committee itself doesn't have any direct link to the Housing Commission. And because this effort was bifurcated, and it shouldn't have been, let me say that again, it was a big mistake to design it to be separated. But since it is, we need a direct link with the Housing Commission. That could be a separate housing committee where the process subcommittee, I'm not in favor of like too many bureaucracies, don't get me wrong, but because there's so much work to be done. They can then, deliver their questions or whatever it is to that group, and they can go talk to the Housing Commission and kind of figure things out. That's at least 2 of them. So right there.
So Deanna, are we able to have a subcommittee that speaks directly with the Housing Commission?
I guess is it the charge to provide updates? And I can give you a little bit of an update later about, what Housing Commission has asked us to do. And maybe there's, an opportunity for staff and members of the CEOC to partner to give an update to the Housing Commission at its meetings. And so I'm trying to understand from Member Johnson what the topics would be. Is it about outreach? Is it about policy?
What I personally would like
would be occurring, and I don't want to get too much. I know we have a lot to cover, and this is not on the agenda. So I sort of,
What I would like to do, Deanna, what I would like to request is that we put the motion that to form a subcommittee on the process of this committee, this committee itself, on the process, timelines, and the elements that go into that timeline. I want to be on that subcommittee, and I encourage other people to be on it as well. We'll put something together and we will share that with the rest of the group. That would be our wish list of what we like to see. Right? And absent that, we need to be honored with what we're requesting as a committee, and let us have some creativity with respect to what we think is going to work. And so I just leave it at that.
So was that a motion to create that subcommittee?
So if I may, Member Fennell, if we can listen to the update of what is happening, that might address some of the questions of like when is happening and what is happening. And so that is what I know Sung came up.
Okay. As long as we reserve 5 minutes to have this motion to come to the table so we can vote on it. And so we don't run out of time like last time.
About out of time.
Well, first,
I'm ready to make some dinner.
well, first, there are members that have little ones, so I just want to check in with them and see what's your time looking like.
Can I just?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Oh, well, I just out of fair, I think it's a respect for everybody's time, to be quite honest, regardless of our family makeup or not. So I don't know if we can manage the time of these meetings accordingly. And be clear about the start and stop date. And I think that will help with participation moving forward.
Member DCNO, you were going to say something as well?
Oh, no, I agree with Member Dow. But I also wanted to add, the Housing Commission, I believe, Diana, you participate in that, where you do share what the CEOC is up to and just give them updates, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So in a way, if we do this subcommittee, will then someone be that person who would then be sharing that information, or how would this work? I'm just a little confused on that.
I was trying to build from Member Johnson's idea of understanding what that role would be. And, I do this past Wednesday, I attended the Housing Commission meeting, which is monthly. They are looking to have an update because, they're very interested in the process. And so I could potentially see an update about our outreach efforts, and that could be something where members of the CEOC help present that. Staff may be there from a technical perspective of like, this is what, components we're going to be working on and how the information feeds into the project. And from an outreach perspective, this is, come and attend this. This is, the surveys that we're doing and why we're doing it. And I could see a partnership in presenting at the Housing Commission meetings.
Deanna, with all due respect, that is not what I'm speaking of. I'm talking about the process and the elements and the timelines regarding this particular committee. Part of that will interface with the Housing Commission. Obviously, it should and it must. But I'm talking about the engagement process, the inflow and the outflow of information. What are the sets of information we need to have as part of the engagement? All of that is currently, you guys have it. I don't see it. I'm being very respectful of your expertise and M Group's expertise, that you guys already know this. But it's not clear to me, and maybe not to the others as well, what that overall details is. I have a very vague idea of we have some engagement, some community outreach, and then somewhere along the way, decisions will be made. That's basically it. But I'm sure it's much more complex than that. I'm giving that the respect to the effort that you and the M group are going to have to go through. Is much more complex than that. And we can handle it. We are not, we have the mind and the brain to process that information. And I'm asking you to give us that respect and either share that with us or let us looking at other cities, because that's the best I can go right now do is by searching what other cities have done and see if we can put a map together and come back to you and say, do you guys have this? Please share it. I would rather you just share it and then that puts us out of our misery, or my misery. I don't have to worry about it. Anyway, I'm putting that motion. I would like to form that subcommittee and I would like to be a part of it, and whoever else wants to participate.
My inclination
Wait.
is
Hold on, Vicky. Sung, can you just give us an idea of what's coming up next and the time that's going to be dedicated to that?
Yes, Chair Fennell, I'd be happy to do that. I have a few slides if you don't mind if I share my screen.
Yes.
Do that real quick. You all see my screen?
yes.
Great. So we had the housing introduction seminar on July 1st. And then next week, we have scheduled a renters focus group and a homeowners focus group. And then the week after, we're trying to schedule the the local businesses focus group, the housing service providers focus group. And let's go to the next slide.
What is the renters focus group? How are you reaching out to those renters to participate? And what communities are you going after?
The city sent out some information and requesting people who would like to volunteer for part of the renters focus group to join. And we've gotten some contact information for people who would like to be part of that renters group. And also homeowners. Cal can give you some numbers, but we've gotten volunteers across all the council districts. Let me move on. And then, so we're also going to have a housing developers focus group as well. And that's profit, nonprofit, small, large, and so forth. And then starting in August, we're gonna have a pop-up. And part of this is to start talking about some of the preliminary land use options. And then we're hoping to have the survey available at the pop-up. So we're planning to have the pop-up in the farmer's market on a Sunday. So we'll have staff there to have people who come by, they can fill out the survey. We'll have like hard copies for people to fill out. And then the next major meeting is going to be the preliminary land use strategies and policy review with the Housing Commission. So what we're planning on doing is going to the Housing Commission and listening in terms of what their thoughts are, what their comments are, what direction they want to provide in terms of this whole housing loan process and just some of the things that they're concerned about. And then we plan on providing a presentation just explaining some of the housing land use strategies, so sort of the site selection strategies. So like how ADUs work, some of the pipeline projects, the religious facilities, where we should put housing, whether we could put in commercial and so forth and so on. So we'll have a presentation on that. The day after that, we'll have the next CEOC meeting. And on that weekend, we plan to be out in the community, kind of doing the same thing that we did with the Housing Commission. One of the things that we wanted to kind of talk to you about is whether you guys think that there would be more engagement on an evening versus a weekend. There's a lot of meetings that we need to go through and we're trying to kind of space them out so we're not having meetings every single weekend. And so one of the ways to do that is to have more night meetings. So that's one of the things that we wanted to go over. And then next slide. And then we'll have another community meeting on August 19th, talking about equity, safety, and environmental justice. And then we have a few other CEOC meetings tentatively scheduled, and just wanted to check on your availability for those meetings as well. Is there any questions?
My first question is how you guys came. First question is how you guys came up with those committees.
The focus groups.
I guess sometimes we, some of us, me personally, get overly involved because I see things happening and then I'm like, well, wait a minute, who put input in that to come up with those committees? Because to have a renters committee, then a homeowners committee, I'm like, okay, my first reaction is how many people did you get from Bellhaven to participate? Because that's, I always look at the communities that have historically been overlooked and excluded. And then again, it goes back to who's conducting those questionnaires when you're in the community conducting them. Because then if it's not the faces that people are going to respond to, then once again, you're not going to get the accurate inputs. So that's my question, how these meetings were created.
Yeah, so we originally came up with these focus groups to kind of start with a broad sense of the bigger issues, and we're going to try to go down further for some of the other different kinds of groups. There's other groups that we would like to have individual interviews with and other small group interviews as well. So this is not an exhaustive list of the types of groups that we'll be interviewing. In terms of who's going to be facilitating, M Group staff will be facilitating these focus group meetings, and we'll be asking the questions that you guys reviewed at the last meeting.
Vice Chair Alarvia.
I just wanted to make sure that we do take time to vote on if there's going to be additional subcommittees. I wanted to kind of throw in the air if it's completely appropriate for the M Group to facilitate the focus groups, because like, you know, for obvious reasons, implicit bias, meet people where they are. I think it has to be committee members. That's what I think, or kind of a co-facilitation, because, right, one of the biggest things in our community is lack of trust. So we have to keep doing things to get the trust back, right? And then the other part is, you know, when the public and even people on the committee ask questions, how are we making sure we answer those questions in a meaningful way? Even the ones we don't have answers to, is there going to be, you know, I know like some cities have a pretty expansive website about the housing element where you can go for like basic questions. I think the biggest question I'm being asked, and I do not have the answer to, is what happened with the previous element. Because one thing I did read, so the last element, I'm not sure if everyone on the committee is aware of this, there was a steering committee. And that's that, you know, a steering committee basically did what we're doing now. But the steering committee was made up of Housing Commission, Planning, City Council, and a couple community members. So right there, you can see working in concert. Right now, we're working separate. And if there's no logical reason for why we're working completely separate, and, you know, I also don't think it's completely appropriate for someone that works for the city to be the liaison. I think also someone from the committee, unless we have a subcommittee, needs to be able to have contact with the housing and planning commissions, because how will we ever know what they're thinking? If we don't know what the planning commission's planning, and the Zoom setup, we don't get direct feedback with the questions asked for any commission at this point. I think it's extremely important that the CEOC has a presence where there is direct contact, because we need to build trust as well. You know, if you had everyone raise their hand right now and say, do we trust that, you know, we understand the housing element, why all the goals were not met last time. No one probably would raise their hand. I could like assume reasons, but it's a pretty lengthy document that the average layperson is not going to read nor understand. So I do think we owe everyone an explanation of what happened and how are we doing things different. If not, this is all theater. I really want to understand what challenges were faced, what obstacles. So how do we move forward without that happening? So I do think we have to provide more transparency, and we may have to piggyback doing co-facilitation, co-liaisons, because trust is not there. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Member DeSiena.
The outreach, I was wondering, have you heard of National Night Out? It's coming up soon in the city of Menlo Park. Well, all the counties are doing it. It's a great way to get a hold of people in the community. It's actually happening, I believe, on August 3rd. So you'll have police officers there, fire department. It's a way to build trust with everyone in our community, from your local police station to your fire station to also the schools. So I think that's a great way to get outreach in our community. And I know here we'll have it at the Bellhaven Elementary School in front of it, I believe. And then number 2 is Chair Fennell, I would love to know a time check. I do have to step out by 8:30 or sooner. So if you can be so kind and let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great idea, the National Night Out.
And I'm going to do a time check. What is everyone's status? Because we have just reports and announcements that we have to get through.
I'm stepping out in around 5 minutes.
Member Johnson, if it's possible, if we can just go on to agenda item E, which is just reports and announcements,
Sure.
and then we can tackle that.
So are we going to forego the vote as we have been requesting for the motion? Or are we going to do that by email? Chair, what is your opinion?
Well, you called the motion, so let's, I believe we can do the vote now on that subcommittee.
So I move for that motion, and anybody, I guess you should call the motion, I guess. And that I put that motion before us. If you want to call for a vote, Chair.
Do we have a vote for Sudie Johnson's subcommittee?
Has the motion been seconded? Okay, thank you. Can you repeat the motion?
The motion in general, I don't know the exact wording, but it is to form a subcommittee regarding the overall process for housing element outreach activities and programs, where we define so we can understand what is the overall process, the timelines, what happens at each time, at each checkpoint, what are the inflow of information we need, and what is the outflow. Basically, that is the purpose of that subcommittee.
Okay, thank you.
Did we have a second for that? And do we have folks that would want to be on that subcommittee? Member Alarvia. And I'm assuming Sudie Johnson, anyone else? And Vicky.
I don't know how much I can offer, but I'm willing to do what I can to be a part of it.
Perfect. So we have you three for the subcommittee of Sudie, what Sudie Johnson suggested. I'm going to go ahead and have us move on to the next agenda items with 10 minutes remaining, starting with Jeff Bradley on the E1 recap of Introduction to Housing webinar, July 1st, 2021.
Thank you, Chair Fennell. I'll make this really quick. As you mentioned, we had a community-wide workshop on July 1st at 6 p.m. in the evening. It was billed as an introduction to the housing element and to housing issues. in the webinar virtual format. It was scheduled from 6 to 8. It was over by 7. We had approximately 30 attendees attending the meeting virtually. Full disclosure, about 10 of those were city officials or elected city people or members of this committee. So in my mind, we only got really like 20 community people coming into our process. So we obviously need to do a better job reaching out to the community. And I loved Vice Chair Olivar's idea to activate her personal social network to get people engaged and activated. That's really how this kind of stuff happens. At that level of people telling people they know and putting stuff on their Facebook and their Instagram and their next door. So we're looking to build on that and really start increasing our numbers with the larger format community meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Recap of update of Housing Commission on July 7th, 2021, Deanna Chow.
Great, thanks, Chair. I think I could be fairly short. I think part of my update was already previously discussed. So the Housing Commission has asked that we provide them with updates, and their meetings are generally once a month, the first Wednesday, excuse me, of the month. I think mostly to keep them informed of what outreaches, what activities, outreach, and engagement we're doing, and so they had some good clarifying questions of staff in terms of making sure that we do reach out to a broad, our outreach is broad, helping ensure that it is in Spanish language, at meetings that we do have interpretation and translation of documents. I think they're eager to get started, just as on some of the policy conversation that Sung mentioned. And so at that next meeting in August, that's when they're going to be starting to dive into some more details. So they were excited to hear about that. So, and CEOC members are welcome to attend. And if there is, and if you'd like to come and help present, I'm happy to have you join me as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Deanna. Any other reports or announcements from staff or committee members? Oh, Vice Chair. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I just want a little clarification about, I think I missed some of what you said, Deanna, about translation and / interpretation services. It will be provided going forward, or what's the status on that?
Thank you for the, yes, thank you. Let me clarify. So as Jeff mentioned, we will be having the survey translated into Spanish. Our next community meeting that we're targeting in early August, we will have that have Spanish interpretation available as part of the community meeting. We're looking to see, what documents can be translated in Spanish. Our webpage, I believe, that was mentioned earlier, there is the ability to, it's in English on the city's webpage, but there is an ability to translate it into different languages. So while it may not be perfect, I think it is, a good tool to have available and for folks to be able to access our webpage. So
what about the CEOC, the actual CEOC meetings?
We haven't discussed that. Generally, our meetings are not, as you mentioned earlier, our city council meetings, other commission meetings are not, does not have interpretation services. But I can share that and go back to our clerk's office and see.
Yeah, I just want to just drive home the point that how can we be inclusive if we're actually not inclusive?
Yeah, thank you for your comment.
I mean, this will be a time, are there talks that we're gonna be more inclusive? Because I mean, I would be extremely a little saddened and probably a little bit enraged if I'm completely being left out and have been left out in terms of my language for I don't know how many years. I think it needs to be something that the city council looks at in a expedient way. If not, like, how can we truly be inclusive? It's kind of like, oh, just having a community meeting with language services is not okay. I mean, from a social work perspective, there's things I can't even do unless someone can understand me. It's almost, I mean, it's pretty unethical, guys.
Thank you, Vice Chair. If there are no other announcements, I am going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.